To me, the sonnet should be listed as a piece of UNESCO intangible heritage because the sonnet has lasted for so long in so many different ways, and it's a very malleable form. It's a form that you can play with. You can drop it on the floor and it won't break and it won't shatter. And Vidyan Ravinthiran has written an amazing book entirely of sonnets. It's, on one level, sonnets to his wife. They're sonnets about love. They're sonnets about their relationship in all its different forms. But it's also about movement across countries. It's also about racism. It's also about history. It's also about his way of relating to the world. And it's all through the medium of the sonnet. And it's not as though the sonnet will ever get tired. And what Vidyan's doing is, I'm not saying he's breathing new life into the sonnet, because it's got plenty of life in it anyway, but he's making the sonnet shine. This really is a fantastic, fantastic collection. And you'll notice that I've done my introduction as an unrhymed sonnet. That's not true, but wouldn't it be good if it was? Perhaps I could have pretended that I did. Vidyan.
Today, I was reading my book by the window, waiting for you, when I noticed one flower of those you'd artfully splayed had snapped. Like a limp wrist, the orange gerbera hung, and over my knuckle it vented a beige gunge. As I snipped the stem for a smaller vase, the glow of the radiant petals was too much. Time lapped me round. The day went unseized. For this was no opportunity I could have missed, only the lonely moment which blazed in my hand, unplucked. Like many, I'd forgotten that time isn't money, and I don't need always to be on the move within the world you've shown me how to love. So I'm a big believer in the moral imagination, or the sympathetic imagination, which is what we use to understand people who are different from us. And I think that we can use it to do that as long as we listen to those people who are different from us and we listen to them about their experiences. So this is a poem a little bit about that. It's also about the white people in my extended family and their sensitivity and their goodness when they discover within their life the operation of racism, and they're sort of forced to confront that and how they behave about it, and I wanted to write something about that. There are things you know that I can't feel. There are things you know that I can't feel, and the other way around. Insults are yelled at me, I hate for you to hear. The boss jokes about ejaculating on you at the place you volunteer. We take it in turns to say, you can't understand. Then we take it back, believers in the imagination. Of course you can, I can, despite what happened or did not to either. When my sister's husband's mum first took my golden nephew to the park, another child wasn't allowed to play with him. She assumed the worst. It was for her like growing out of her chest a third mixed-race arm, naked and hemophiliac and liable to be punched. Now each of us requires new armor and ways besides love of taking it off. So I'm going to read two more sonnets. And the next poem I was going to read, I was going to read a poem which is really me grumbling about a convention in TV and films, which is when you see a couple and they're reading in bed, that's a kind of shorthand for they don't have sex anymore. And I always thought that's just totally ridiculous. It's basically TV and film kind of attacking this medium, books. When, actually, what stops you having sex in a relationship is box sets, isn't it? But yes, thank you. But I'm not going to read that poem, and that's because there's something else I'd like to talk about very quickly. I'd like to read a poem which kind of explodes the rather tired concept, or I hope it does, of authenticity. Because something I've noticed, I've been disappointed in, is reviews of poets of colour, and it hasn't happened to me with this book, but it's happened to others, where the word authenticity will become a sort of weirdly weaponized term. It's like the sort of white reviewer is saying that this poet is pretending to be something they're not. And it's a way of reading poets of colour biographically, as victims of history or whatever, instead of as being creative artists. It can become a rather blurry, unexamined way of casting aspersions on their technical decisions. And so, yes, that's a bit of my grumble about it. And here's a poem which is very much not about authenticity, which is about a kind of hybrid inheritance. And there's an allusion in it to Czesław Miłosz, the amazing Lithuanian-Polish poet, and he wrote a beautiful poem about porcelain, which is really a poem about political violence. And there's also an allusion in it to Michelangelo's David, the sculpture. Unlike some, I should explain, the titles run into the first line of the poem, which is why I'm beginning all the poems like this. Unlike some others of no uncertain terms, I do trust those who struggle with my names. The lady in the dry cleaners, for instance, saying, "I'll need you to spell that out, pet." Am I to believe this kindly Geordie is a bigot? Her humour in this common circumstance is as bright shining a part of civilization as the David's chiselled, white, not quite fist, as the shattered porcelain of Miłosz, or your tribe's habit of, in the post-prandial hush, endlessly offering each other cups of tea. Or the tactful cheat sheet typed up by my family for my sister's wedding, from which I'd finally learn my own name's correct Tamil pronunciation. So apparently it's Vidyan, not Vidyan, but since I've been getting it wrong this long, what can one do? So my final poem I'm going to read is called In the Mixed Area. I grew up in a part of Leeds called Holt Park, which Wikipedia describes unpromisingly as a mixed area. I used to be kind of pissed off about that, but now I quite like the phrase mixed area. Maybe a sonnet can be a sort of mixed area, if you like. So I grew up in this part of Leeds. The reason I sound like a posh Southern is because my aspirational immigrant parents sent me to speech classes. But I very much feel at home in Leeds and in the parts of the north. I very much feel like I belong there. And so the poem is a bit about that. It's about growing up in Holt Park and how my nephews now grow up in Ilkley, a far more salubrious area, and they have a very different childhood to what I have, and so it's about that. There's been mention of Roddy Lumsden. I just want to say something quickly. I wouldn't be here reading poems today if it wasn't for Roddy Lumsden. And, I know there's lots of people in here who really owe him so much. I just wanted to say that. After all this, if anyone wants to just go for a drink and share some stories about Roddy, I'd really enjoy that. Okay, in the mixed area. In the mixed area where my parents live, there opens a Sardinian trattoria. I read in one of their tea-stained tabloids a rant to mock with you on the phone about Thomas the Tank Engine. The new film will include a Chinese train, an Indian train, a girl. Only the last sentence admits Gordon, Percy, and the rest will remain. Our favourites will keep their jobs. My nephew, think of his name as Growl without the G, was the biggest fan at the age of 3. I remember how afraid he was when he, Thomas, went off the rails. Then, running his toy along the radiator, the boy invented a game of angry delight. A towel tumbled the train to the ground. "Landslide," yelled Raoul. I love my nephew in his big house in Ilkley and his golden mixed-race skin. Thank you.